Thanks guys for joining today. We appreciate your time and hoping that this can be helpful information today. I know that as I was going through all this information and putting it all together, I mean, some of the stuff that I already knew, but I found it really helpful for me of just stuff that I hadn't really put links together with of how I was feeling and what was going on in my body. And it just provided some feelings of being normal and understanding. And I know for me, when I have some scientific reasons of why I'm responding that way or responding the way I am instead of just feeling like I'm crazy, it's a very helpful thing, as well as knowing how to address the issue. So that's the purpose of what I would like for you guys to get out of things today. Like Heather was saying, please feel free to ask questions as we go. There's a lot of information here, and I really tried to keep it small as much as we can. So if you do have any questions, pop in and ask them, or you can at the end also. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going over calming the nervous system during social isolation. Oh no, it's not moving. There we go. First I want to go over the Blomquist health benefits real quick, just so you guys have an overview of that. Sounds like a lot of you have been attending the other one, so you've probably gotten this information already. But for those of you that haven't, let's just go over real quick what Blomquist Health offers. We do support for any life change, any life challenges. So it doesn't have to be big things like crisis. It can be just about anything, even something as simple as stress over budgeting, especially right now. A lot of people, if you struggle with budgeting and have had hours cut or different things like that, you may need some additional support or brainstorming on how to manage that, or just managing stress in this situation. A lot of people are having increases in stress with managing being home, especially if you're working from home from the first time, or managing children in school, or doing both at one time. It's a lot of stress, so please reach out. It is a free service available to you. And the nice thing is we do offer services that insurance companies don't cover, such as couples therapy. A lot of insurance companies will not cover couples therapy or family therapy. And that's something that we offer as a benefit to you. And the nice thing is it's free, so there's no copay. It's 100% confidential. We do not have any communication about your sessions or who's coming with your employer, which is a nice thing. You don't have to worry about your manager knowing that you're coming, anything like that. It is confidential service. Right now we have completely moved to phone or video sessions. I always prefer video because I have a hard time connecting with people over the phone. I like to see faces. So that is something that we are continuing to do, and that includes crisis sessions too. So if you do find yourself in a spot where you need some quick support, please call us and we can get you on the schedule, or even just meet up with you real quick online so we can supply the crisis session support that you may need. And that's down there too. So 24/7 crisis line. We always have a therapist on call in the evenings and on the weekends. So please feel free to reach out if you would like and need some support. We are open same hours, so 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. most days. That's Monday through Thursday. And then Friday, I believe we are open from 9 to 5. And then Saturday, I believe, is 8 to 3, I believe. That's the hours on that. I don't do Saturdays, so I'm not 100% sure on that. So those are the services available to you, and please feel free to reach out and allow us to help you at this time in any way that we can. Okay, so let's go over to overview of topics real quick. So the things that we're going to be talking about. So an overview of the nervous system. And then next we will talk about the social needs of the nervous system. So how, if we're learning about the nervous system, how does it relate to the social isolation that we have going on right now? And then the effects of loneliness, because that's what a lot of social isolation is feelings of loneliness, and you're not having the ability to connect with people like you normally do, whether it be at work or family members or friends. And then what occurs within your body during social isolation, when you're feeling that you're going crazy and you're irritable and stress is popping up and you don't know how to handle it, is what's going on in your body. And then we'll go over coping skills of how do you get through this period of time, especially the longer and longer that it draws out, the harder it's going to be to cope if you don't have a strategic plan. And then the final thing we're going to go over is calming the nervous system. So how do you focus primarily on that? Because you can have coping skills all day long, but the problem is if your brain's not in the right place because your nervous system is overloaded, it's very difficult to get coping skills to work. So that's why we're going to break it down into 2 different sections. Okay, so let's go on to the nervous system. So this is one that I'm just trying to keep very basic because obviously our bodies are very complex. And I don't know enough about this to really get into very minute information. So we're going to keep it very brief. So the nervous system is what sets mammals apart from reptiles and different things like that. So the nervous system, especially that we have and that sets humans apart and monkeys, is that we have the cortex up here. And that's going to be your higher function thinking. That's going to be what helps you to make plans and lists and think through things, executive functioning type of things. So the nervous system includes the brain and the brainstem, as well as the nerves. And you can see on that picture that the yellow parts going out through the entirety of your body is going to be your nerves. And the purpose of the nerves is they send out information and communicate with all of your organs outside of the brain and brainstem, and send information back to the brain so you can respond appropriately to what the needs of the body are. So, so it's broken down, the nervous system's broken down into 2 subsystems. So that's the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord. And then there's the peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves that go out from there. So what we're going to be focusing on mainly is the peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system, sorry, I'm having a hard time with that word, has 2 subsystems itself. So it's got the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system, what that does is it's used for our fight or flight reactions. So anytime that we have something that pops up that our body's saying, this isn't good, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in. The parasympathetic nervous system, the purpose for that is to counteract the sympathetic nervous system. It puts our bodies back in homeostasis and helps us to calm down. But we're going to get into each of those a little bit more real quick. So sympathetic nervous system. So anytime there is perceived danger, and that's in quotations because everybody has different perceived danger. And this is a lot going to be based on your experiences in life. So say, for example, if someone has a history of trauma, their perceived danger is going to be much more heightened than someone else that doesn't have a lot of complex trauma. So for people, you know, you think about like veterans and things like that when they come back from war, or police officers, they scan their environment a lot. And sometimes just little things can kick them into fight or flight mode because that's what they've been trained to do. Or someone that has a long history of abuse, they're going to be more sensitive to situations that for those of us that haven't, wouldn't normally trigger that. So that's why it's perceived danger. Some of it's very often, like obviously if there's like a big dog coming at you, everyone's going to look at that and say, oh, this is a problem. Your brain's going to kick in. What happens with that is your sympathetic nervous system triggers the brain to release 2 neurotransmitters, which is just chemicals in your brain, called norepinephrine and epinephrine. Most of you should have heard of that phrase before. Norepinephrine, the purpose of that is it's released right at that perceived danger. And what it does is it increases your heart rate, so your blood pumps faster, which gets blood to the big organs and increases oxygen, so you have more ability for your body to function and get away. It increases glucose in your body, so you release a bunch of glucose, which gives you energy to fight or to run. It widens your airways, so that you have the ability to get more oxygen to your body, and then it slows down the digestive system, so you don't really need to eat and you're not doing things like going to the bathroom, so your body can save and conserve its energy. Epinephrine, if you've got long-term exposure, so norepinephrine is your very primary response. If your perceived danger is something that seems to last a little bit longer, then your brain will dump the epinephrine at that point to keep that response going. The sympathetic nervous system is not meant for long-term activation. It is something that is supposed to get you out of danger and then turn off. That's the natural response to it. So for those people that are stuck in sympathetic nervous system a lot, which again are the people that have heightened responses. So people with long-term trauma or have been trained to constantly be on guard, or long histories of anxiety. Anxiety triggers this system a lot. You're going to have long-term activation, which is not a healthy thing for your body. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. So let's move on real quick to the, this is kind of your reset button. So this is where we want to be living most of the time. It's in your calm place. It's kind of your zen. It's where your brain is functioning the best, where you can think clearly, where you're calm and your breathing's normal and your heart rate's normal. It comes in and calms down the sympathetic nervous system. So that's why I put like a reset button. I visualize that big Staples button is what it does. With this, so the brain releases a hormone called acetylcholine, and then I've heard it pronounced different ways, but it is a chemical that goes in and counteracts the norepinephrine and epinephrine to help set your body back to normal. Like I was saying here, some people don't go to this place very often. And so it's almost hard to imagine that this is a system that exists within your body. And this is ultimately where you want to get. And for those of you, like if you think about it right now and just kind of think about where you feel like you're living right now within your body. The hope is that we're in our parasympathetic nervous system the majority of the time. And we're going to kick back and forth, especially with, you know, people that were, had a lot of fear with the earthquakes. Was that last week or the week before? I don't even know. This time, I can't even tell you what day it is right now. I'm so thrown off with being home all the time. So it can be really hard to even imagine that this is a system that's available to you at this time. So the hope is that we can get you back to this place and not feeling so activated all the time of being in your sympathetic nervous system. But I do want you guys just to think about that for a minute. Like, where do you feel like you're living right now? Are you in your sympathetic nervous system? Are you in your parasympathetic nervous system? Are you kind of going back and forth between the two, which is really normal? Where do you feel like you are, just to check in with yourself? Because I know for me, I'm definitely going back and forth between the two. Sometimes I feel like I'm very much in my sympathetic nervous system and not responding very well. And I don't like being in that place because the way I handle things with homework for my daughter, or stressful situations with work, or I'm trying to work and I've got dogs barking and children needing things and different stuff like that. It's not a place that I like to be. So I make a lot of effort to do the things I can to get back into my parasympathetic nervous system, but it's definitely normal to be switching back and forth. So let's talk about the long-term effects of being in the sympathetic nervous system. So long-term release of neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and epinephrine will actually start to trigger dumping of different hormones, which is going to be, well, neurotransmitter, dopamine also. But it starts to release cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline, which is supposed to counteract the adrenaline. So your body really starts to attack itself. It's cortisol is not good for long-term release. That is something that is what we dump a lot with anxiety into our bodies. And people that have long-term chronic anxiety can actually start to have, your organs can start to have issues. If you think about people that have really chronic histories of anxiety, a lot of people will have digestive issues, they'll have headaches, they'll have chronic pain that you can go to the doctors for and they can't find a purpose for it. Or, you know, some people will get rashes or hives, and that's really your body attacking itself because it's dumping hormones and neurotransmitters that are not meant for long-term use. So this becomes a problem for people, for anybody that's got this long-term release. And ultimately, it really starts to affect your mental health. If you think about it, if your brain is not functioning to the best of its ability because it's just in fight or flight mode all the time, how do you do basic things like focusing on work or connecting with people in your life, or even imagining doing things that you normally like to do, or things that sound fun, because things don't sound fun anymore because all you're doing is surviving. And that's a problem. You don't want to be in that place, and you don't want to have issues with your body because it's responding in a way that it's not meant to. So I'm sure we've all experienced that with headaches, with long-term stress is really common, or stomach upset. You know, the hope is that it goes away, but when it doesn't, it can cause a lot of long-term chronic issues. So
I got it. Thanks.
does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. We will move on then. Oh yeah, so that's what I forgot, there was a second slide to that. So so you can see there where your body's fighting itself. So it can lead to high blood pressure, heart disease, headaches, like I said. Psychosomatic health issues is what I was talking about, where there's health issues that doctors can't explain, but they're still there. They're still very real. It's just not a medical issue that's causing that. Depression, anxiety, social withdrawal, and a lot of people can feel like the sense of loss of self. So the person that you feel like you naturally are doesn't exist anymore because you are living in your sympathetic nervous system and your body is attacking itself. So that's why I put the feelings of loss of self, because I'll hear that from people sometimes, is they're just thinking like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like the happy person that I used to be doesn't exist. And that's not a good feeling to have when you feel like you've lost who you are and you don't know how to get back to it. So let's go on to social needs of the nervous system. So this is going to break a little bit more down into the social isolation issue. Let's see here. So we are hardwired for connection. Right when we're born, we need connection with our parents or primary caregivers, whoever it's going to be that's taking care of you. If you think, like, they spend a lot of research that talks about a child's ability to bond with people long term if they don't get it if they don't get some type of physical or eye contact within the first, I mean, depends on the study. Some of them say within the first 5 minutes, some of them say within the first few hours, but we are hardwired for connection. And in terms of like attachment styles, the first year of life is actually the most important foundation for whether you will trust people, whether you will trust that the people that are supposed to be taking care of you will show up, or they will be consistent, or they're going to connect with you at all. You think about kids that grow up and they've done a lot of research with kids that grew up in like Russia and orphanages, and later on in life, a lot of them just lack the ability to connect with people in a healthy way, as they were never given that to begin with. But we are neurologically wired for connection. We get neurological pathways through connection. So as we connect with people, our brain actually creates synapses and pathways that help us to remember those things and help us to know how to connect automatically with people. So if you don't have that, it gets really confusing. Your brain just doesn't know how to do it. And we create stories about the world through connection. So like I was saying, within that first year, you learn whether you can trust people, whether you can trust that you're going to get fed, whether you can trust that someone's going to show up and take care of your needs. And some people have those needs met as children, but then have issues later on, say with, romantic relationships that cause a lot of mistrust in the world or mistrust in relationships. So we create stories through connection. That's how we decide whether things are safe and whether we can trust ourselves. And a lot of our self-esteem comes from connection too. If you think of people that have had struggles with connection, especially children, because they don't know how to logically explain things. They can't logically look at it and say, this person wasn't there for me because they were working a lot, or, or this person did the best that they could, but they just didn't know how to connect because of their history. Children don't have the ability to do that, and it really affects their self-worth, because that's how they know how to relate, is that if you're not connecting, then that means there's something wrong with me. Or you think about an adult that has healthy connection, but then later gets into a romantic relationship that, someone cheats or there's mistrust in there, and we start to question our ability. We start to question our self-worth, and it's just part of that creating stories about ourselves in the world. So different people have different levels of connection. So if you think about like introverts and extroverts, extroverts have a lot more need to connect with people. They like to go out. They like to be, a lot of extroverts, including myself, it's like, having fun and being the center of attention sometimes for people. There is a lot more need to get out, and extroverts are probably struggling a lot more right now with this social isolation because their higher need for connection is not being met, and the nervous system is being affected by that. Whereas introverts, for some people, I know some people that they're thinking there's no change in my world right now because I'm used to being home. I'm used to not talking to people. I'm used to avoid going to the grocery store. So it's kind of, I like to think about it as a spectrum. And some people really like to think that they don't need connection at all. And usually with people like that, they've had experiences of, they haven't had their connection needs met when they were younger. So you see that as it's a coping skill that we create, is that when things are inconsistent in connection when we're younger, that we just learn to withdraw and not need that from people to begin with. So that sometimes is the reason why we have a difference in need of connection, where we might naturally be more outgoing, but life experiences has kind of dampened that.
Amy, we have a couple comments and questions.
Yeah, go for it.
One comment was, I'm worried that I'm stuck in the wrong system, and that's why I'm interested in this webinar. So I don't know if you're going to be talking about that.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we will get, that will be the end, is where we talk a lot about getting out of that system. Absolutely.
Okay. And then someone put rest in peace, extrovert life right now.
I know, right? It's hard.
I know. And then someone said, as an introvert, I'm getting overwhelmed by all the people trying to reach out constantly. I just want people to leave me alone with the things I get so I can get the things done.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then one question that we had was, for those of us who struggle a great deal with anxiety, particularly general anxiety disorder, what are different things that can stop the cycle of going into fight or flight?
So that is one thing that we will get into at the end. So
Okay, cool.
We definitely will hit on that. Because it would not be good to give you guys all this information and not tell you what to do with it. So we will get into that at the end, because that's what would be the purpose besides for that. So, and I'll give you some things that are going to be a little bit more long-term skills, as well as I'm going to go over one that's very short-term with how do you get out of it right now. It's a very basic technique that I'm going to teach you guys that will help you to get out of it in the moment, so you can reset and then actually go to the coping skills that work long term. Because if you can't get out of the sympathetic nervous system, like I was saying, it's very difficult. You can learn basic things like meditation. How do you meditate when you're stuck in your sympathetic nervous system? It doesn't work because your brain's not functioning. You're in the part of the brain that's not capable of doing those type of things in the moment. So you've got to know how to shut it off to be able to do those long-term skills. So we will do those two things, so you can know how to reset things so you can do the long-term coping skills. So I'm glad that we brought that up. Are there more questions?
Nope, that's it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And I have heard that from the introverts, from people that are introverted, and even friends, is a lot of people that are extroverted are reaching out and checking in because they're concerned, but they're actually overwhelming other people more. So if you are an introvert and feeling overwhelmed with that, I would just encourage you to let people know, or, sometimes turn off your phone for a little while if you can, or mute text. You can mute text message from some people. At least I know on the iPhone you can. I don't know about the other phones. But that may be something that's helpful, but this is also a time, this is a time for you to be able to set some boundaries with people, and hopefully they will honor them, and not take it personally. But it's hard to get things done when you've got so much stuff in and out. And I know for me, my nervous system gets overwhelmed by sensory input. So if I'm trying to do something and focus and I've got a lot of noise going on in the background, like people talking and then music on or TV or, dogs barking because there's people out walking around our house, like it really overwhelms my nervous system. As it's hard for my brain to filter things out. That's just something that I struggle with. So I've had to really, hone in on some of the ways that I can limit the sensory input. So I guess this has been a learning experience for me because I'm not used to so much sensory input when I'm trying to work and that. So I guess cup half full for me is I'm learning some new skills on how to do that. And hopefully I can take that back into my life when I'm back in the office. So, yeah, so let's go back to the slide. So your nervous system knows best. Follow what it's telling you. If it's telling you that you need to shut down for a little while and just, I know for one thing for me is reading a book. I love to read. It's something that is really calming for me. Listen to your nervous system. Don't question it. Your brain knows what you need. Sometimes it's hard to know, like instinctually, to follow that. But really start to hone in on your body at this time and say, like, what is it telling me? What do I need right now? Because your brain knows what you need. You just have to listen to it. We all need to connect for our brains to function at its best. So again, that goes back to the spectrum of different levels of connecting, but we all need to connect. And if we don't do that, then our brains don't function very well. So, and whether that just be it functions cognitively, but not necessarily the best emotionally. It's different, but the best way to balance it out is having connection with people. And one of the things that we're going to talk about too is the hard part with this digital era we have moved into is that our brains are not wired for that. Our brains are wired for sensory connection. So it has to be seeing someone or hearing someone or physical touch too. When we're just texting people or doing things through social media, there's not really connection that way. It doesn't satisfy the needs of your nervous system. So you may be connecting with someone, but you're not soothing your nervous system. You've got to do it through sensory integration with that. There are some social media things like Snapchat. You may see someone's face, or Marco Polo or things like that. You may be able to see their face and you're talking to that person directly, and that can work, but the direct contact works the best. So we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. So let's talk about the effects of loneliness. And that's really what a lot of us are experiencing right now, is a sense of loneliness. And we're going to go into the different of real and perceived loneliness. So how many of you guys can think of a time where you felt lonely? I'm sure if I could see you guys, because I can't. Oh, there. No, most people have their video off. I'm sure everyone could raise their hand. We can all think of a time that we felt lonely. It's just something that happens in all areas. There have been a lot of loneliness studies. So there was a lady who started looking at loneliness in the 1950s, and she actually published a book that prompted a lot of studies in the psychology world and the neuropsychology world on looking into the effects of loneliness. And there is a difference between actual being lonely or isolated, I guess would be the best word, or alone when you're not around other people, versus perceived loneliness. And perceived loneliness, what that is, I'm sure it's a lot of us can relate to having so many people around, but still feeling completely alone. It's kind of a perfect description for middle child syndrome. I am a classic middle child, and I can look back on my childhood and really remember a lot of it of just feeling alone, even though I had siblings, even though my parents were around, as I just spent a lot of time feeling lonely. And that's not a good feeling. So yeah, there's been a lot of really cool studies, and this was the part that I really found interesting when I was looking into reading the studies and watching the TED Talks of people that had done research studies and talking about their results. And what they were talking about is through all of these studies that are popping up showing that perceived loneliness is just as detrimental to people as actually being alone. It causes just as many problems as the person that's been isolated. You know, so you think about someone who likes to withdraw a lot and stay home. It's just as damaging to be a person that is, well, I should say, it's just as damaging to the nervous system to be completely alone as it is to have perceived loneliness long term. There have been a couple different surveys. I know AARP and then I think UCal. I'm not sure which one. I don't remember which one it was. Put out a national survey seeing what people would report in terms of feeling alone versus feeling connected. And both of those studies, excuse me, found that it was about 40 to 45% of Americans report feeling lonely, which is a huge amount. I was really surprised with how much that is. And it'd be interesting to see, for me at least, the difference between how many people feel alone now with the technology era that we're in versus before. So, excuse me, just have something caught in my throat. Don't worry, I'm not sick. Feel like I need to clarify that right now. Okay, sorry about that. So that was a high level, and it's just curious about if it would be different back in the 80s or 90s, perceived loneliness versus now. And really, did a couple of years ago, I did a talk on the increases in depression in adolescents from now that smartphones have been around, and that was about 2010 where they started to see a drastic increase in depression and suicides. So even before that, in the early 2000s, it'd be really interesting to see the difference in loneliness reports with that. So if someone wants to do a study, that'd be really cool. Not me, I don't want to do it. Okay, so let's talk about the effects of loneliness on our nervous system. So we have physical cues in our body that alert us of things that we need. So think, for example, like thirst. Thirst tells us that we need water. That, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm having this little scratch in my throat. So thirst or hunger. Hunger is telling us that our brain is low on energy and we need to eat to get things up. We've got all sorts of physical cues. Loneliness is our body's warning system to alert us of threats to our social body. So our nervous system is starting to lack the need that it has for connection. So loneliness, the purpose of it is to kick in and alert you to go connect with people. So if you think about the people that, you know, your extroverts especially can pick it up, that they say, I'm lonely, and then they're going to make action to go out and connect with people. This may be a little bit slower with people that are more introverts because, again, they don't need the connection quite as much with other people, or it may be just a different form of connection. Instead of going out and seeing people, it may be more of the, okay, I'm gonna call someone. So you're not necessarily having to go out of your comfort zone quite as much. But that's what loneliness does, is it just tells us like, hey, your nervous system needs some soothing, and go out and do it. So I'm so sorry. Got this scratch. So got the little mousy guy here. So we're going to talk about a little bit of some research that has been done with mice, and they had to do it with mice because of the fact that the Internal Review Board won't allow them to isolate human beings. So it's something that's just been done with mice. So there's been quite a few research studies where they've taken mice and they were born into their little, I don't know, what do they call them? It's not litter. I don't know what mice little families are called, but they're born into their little family and they would stay there for a couple weeks, and then they would actually separate them off and put them into their own little cages. And some of the studies, they would be clear cages so they could still see people, they could still see the other mice, but they didn't have the physical connection with them. And some of them would be just split off, so they were completely isolated. They would do that for about 3 months was the maximum amount of time that they were allowed to do it, because after that point, it became cruel. I mean, it's a little mean to begin with, but at that point is when that they found that it did irreversible damage to them. So what they would do is one study in particular is they took the mice and they would put them out into a maze, or some of them it was a field. And what they noticed with these mice is after they would isolate them, and they do some brain scans with them too to see what parts of the brain were activated before and after the isolation. So those ones were a little interesting. But they would notice that the mice switched into a self-preservation mode. So they would focus in a way where they were just taking care of their primary needs instead of focusing on connecting with the other mice or connecting or keeping themselves safe even. The ones that they had in the field, they noticed that they would actually just go along the perimeter of the field instead of going into the bushes and things like that to protect themselves. So they weren't even going into protecting themselves from wildlife. They were just really panicking. Their brains were functioning in that fight or flight mode. So they weren't thinking clearly, and their ability to connect with the other mice was really hindered and for a little while until they were able to connect again. So it was really interesting with how they had that, the information that came with it. So one of the things that I looked at is the lonelier the brain, the more focus there is on self-preservation and not others. So that's the conclusion that they came to when they worked with observing these mice. Any questions on that? No, we're good?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so the shift in the brain focus creates long-term effects of your body. So this is what they were talking about when you've got long-term perceived loneliness or actual loneliness. So what they started to notice in people when they were doing the studies where people, where they could look at perceived loneliness instead of actually isolating people or creating loneliness, they noticed increases in high blood pressure, increased risk for heart disease, higher rates of cancer among people that reported long-term loneliness, higher rates of diabetes, and then obviously mental health disorders or symptoms. Sometimes it's not full disorders, but symptoms of depression, anxiety, and for some people that even didn't have necessarily situations of trauma in the past, they can actually experience trauma responses where their brain and their body is storing it as trauma. So you can start to see symptoms of like post-traumatic stress disorder popping up in people that aren't quite sure where it came from to begin with. And then it actually, for people that with perceived loneliness, they're more likely for Alzheimer's and dementia that they showed with that. And for those people with Alzheimer's and dementia, when they felt lonely, they actually had an increase in their symptoms. Which, I mean, it's kind of hard in that situation because if the person doesn't remember you, then even though you're around, they may feel more lonely. So how do you determine between the two? So this gentleman in particular that I watched that was talking about his research study, so he did what's called a meta-analysis. And for those of you guys that aren't really up with research of what the term means, is he took, I think it was 50 different research studies and looked at their results and put together a compilation of what their results showed. And what he found is that people, so we're looking at increased odds of early death. So for people that lived in areas of high pollution. So, I mean, Utah gets the inversion really bad. It's pollution technically. Or people that in like LA or China or different places like that. They have, for air pollution, 5% increase in odds of an early death. That's it. That kind of surprised me. I thought it'd be a little bit more than that. Obesity. People that are obese have a 20% increase in odds of an early death. Excessive drinking. I don't know exactly who gets to determine what excessive is, but people with excessive drinking are 30% more likely to die in early death. And people that report perceived or actual loneliness are 45% more likely to die in early death. And that's really scary to me. And I think a lot of that is because of the fact that your nervous system is reacting. So your body is attacking itself and you're more likely to have those health conditions. So that was one of the things when I was reading it that I was like, ugh, that's a little scary. So 45%, no bueno. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening, what occurs in social isolation within ourselves. So let's talk, well, and you can see there, it says your nervous system freaks out. We've already kind of talked about that. So So now we've got this COVID-19 thing, and our lives for most of us have changed drastically. Schools have been canceled. Now we're becoming teachers and having to learn how hard our teachers work to begin with, and trying to figure out working from home. And there's never a break anymore either. Like, I know parents with young kids can relate to the fact that you can't even go to the bathroom without them knocking on the door or sticking their little fingers underneath the door, or it's the dog, and there's just no break. China's actually reported an increase in divorce rates, or people filing for divorce, since the isolation occurred, and they're now out of it, most of them, at least the first group that came with it. So things have changed because we're staying at home all the time. We're not getting out. We're not doing things that we normally like to do. So there's been a really big decrease in that. No break from daily life stress, like I was saying. You just can't get away. And especially for those people with the sensory overload, if you can't get away from the sensory input, it's very difficult to calm down your nervous system. A lot of people are experiencing financial stress right now. Very thankful for the fact that I still am able to work, and able to maintain my financial income. And I really have a lot of heartfelt pain for those people that are going to have a lot of financial stress from this, people that are losing their companies, people that are that are just completely out of work at this time. There's going to be a lot of financial stress, and for some people it's going to be very long term and hard hitting. And how do you manage that right now? It's really hard, and especially because we don't know when it's going to end. We've got stress about health and safety. Like, you have to worry not only about yourself not getting sick, but your family members. And I know for me, like, if I get sick, I know my immune system's strong. I'll probably be sick for a little bit, and I'll be okay. But I mean, the hard part is like, okay, well, what about if my parents get sick? They're elderly. That's scary. Or what about if my little baby niece gets sick? She's really young. That's scary. And thinking about those things, that really can increase stress. And again, we don't know when it's going to go away. We don't know when that fear is going to go away. And we're not even at our peak from what people have predicted of people getting sick. So there's stress with that. Stress about the world in general, is this isn't just about the United States. Obviously, this is something that's been all over the world, and wondering how we're all going to be doing at some point. No contact with friends and family. That can be very difficult for a lot of people. Some people don't really care, but for those people that do, it can be really difficult. And then I put figuring hours schoolwork. That's the typo. Figuring out schoolwork. I can tell you, I had a day that literally I felt like I had 6 hours that I thought I was going to lose my mind, because I could not figure out what's jumping back and forth between different Nearpod and Lexia and different things for reading. And I really just, like, a lot of parents are reporting saying we have a newfound respect for teachers, because it is very hard to keep a young child on task at home when there's so many different things to play with. So there's a lot of stress with that. And all of us that are really struggling with this whole Common Core concept for math. I mean, it's really funny to watch the videos online of parents just getting really frustrated because they're trying to figure out Common Core math. There's also going to be an increase in stress for a lot of children. Their children thrive in structure. They don't like it, they'll fight it, but they thrive with schedules, and they thrive with predictability. And there is none of that right now. It's, you can try as much as you can at home, and that's awesome if you can get things on as much of a schedule as you can. But a lot of kids will have more reactivity. They're going to be more emotional. They're going to be fighting with siblings or different things like that. So that increases stress a lot. And then I have a couple of teenagers that are in their senior year right now, that I work with, and not even thinking about this is, the fact that they're completely losing the end of their senior year. And for some people don't care, but for a lot of seniors, that's a big deal, because they're not doing senior prom. They may not have, senior sluff day or even graduation. I mean, I hope that they would do it in the summer to the best of the school district's abilities or the school's ability, but they may completely lose that, as well as, college students, for those that are graduating, is they may just lose graduation. And for those that care, it's a big deal, and it's also a grief process with that. So those are just some of the changes that I could think of on this list. I'm sure there's a lot more, but this is just the basics of what I had. So let's go on to the next one. For a lot of people are kind of wondering, like, what happened to me? I'm not coping well. I'm not feeling well. I don't know what to do with myself, or I'm not, and it, may switch day to day, but just feeling like, what happened to my brain? I'm not doing well. So the sympathetic nervous system is overloaded if you're feeling like that. If you're feeling like you're not managing things, you can pretty much guarantee that your sympathetic nervous system is on and you're not getting the relief that you need in your body. So let's go over some signs of knowing whether you are stuck in the sympathetic nervous system. So you're going to notice a lot of increased heart rate. So you feel like your heartbeat's constantly going. Increased breathing or shortness of breath for a lot of people, where you feel like you can't, there's not like a deep oxygen flow where you have to actually intentionally slow down and take a deep breath. There's a lot of dumping of hormones into your body, so that cortisol, which of course is going to increase your breathing and your heart rate. So those are some of the things that are going into your body right now. Irritability is going to be a big one, where you feel like things that would normally not bother you, or things that you could really roll with, are bothering you right now and you're not quite sure how to handle it. Lack of concentration and memory. So you may feel like you're stretching your concentration into so many different areas that it's hard to focus on one thing. So you're just feeling stretched and panicky with everything. Impulse buying of objects that don't make sense. I'm going to throw that one on there. So toilet paper, different things like that. Like, you can look at that one. Some of it makes sense, but for a lot of people that are stuck in their nervous system, we're looking for ways to control things. And that's what the mass buying of things is it's like, I'm going to control things. I'm going to do what I can to provide some relief to my system. And for some people, that is the impulse buying, or setting up things at home, or, it's different things like that. It looks different for different people, but if you're feeling the need to impulse buy, or like that panicky feeling of I've got to do something to control, have some sense of control, that's a pretty good sign that you're in your sympathetic nervous system. Constant upset stomach, or decrease in appetite, or even sometimes increase in appetite. I notice that I'm eating a lot more, and I wouldn't say necessarily that my appetite's increased. It's more that the fridge is right there and I'm bored sometimes, or I'm not getting out and doing things, so I'm eating more, and I've had to really be careful with that so I don't gain the quarantine 15, they're calling it 15 pounds. Mind racing. So you're feeling like you're having a hard time slowing your mind down. It's constantly going and going. You're worried about the future. You're worrying about right now. You're worrying about the past. You're worrying about other people. You're worrying about, a lot of different things. And a lot of it is very real. So it's not that there isn't things to worry about. It's that you can't slow it down. It just doesn't turn off, which ultimately makes it difficult to sleep. So if you're not sleeping, then your brain's not going to be functioning very well either. So that's kind of a cycle that can be really difficult for those people that don't sleep well. One of the big purposes of sleep is to actually get into a place where your body can fix your DNA issues. So if you get into looking into like sleep studies and what really goes on during that time, all of us have DNA changes in different cells throughout our body that need to be fixed throughout the night, or into your brain, where your brain goes in and gets rid of stuff that it doesn't need. And that's something that happens when you're sleeping. So if you're not getting the refreshing things that you need, if your DNA is not being able to be fixed, if your body and your brain's not able to clear itself out, you're just adding and adding and adding to the stress that's going on in your body. So that's a good sign too. Feeling like you just want to run away or crawl out of your skin. That's a really common one, of knowing that you're stuck in your sympathetic nervous system like that. You just can't, like, your body is just like this and you just don't know how to fix it, or how to get out of it. But a lot of people will say, like, I just want to run away, or that is like, I feel like I just want to crawl out of my skin. Those are pretty good signs that you're stuck in that spot. So some of you may relate to a lot of those symptoms. Some of you may be able to say, like, okay, here's just a few. So It's good to look at it and say like, okay, what may show up for me? Because then you're going to know when you're stuck in that place so you can get out of it. Any questions on any of that? No, we're good? Okay. This just kind of reminded me of what people may feel like right now. I thought it was just a funny picture. So there's that. Kind of feel like you're at war within yourself and maybe within your life. Okay, so let's move on to coping skills. So coping with social isolation, how to stay sane during a time that feels insane. So let's talk just real quick about some of the long-term things that will help you. So this is one that I'm sure a lot of people are struggling with right now. I think we just struggle with it on average in our country, but nutrition is huge. You've got to making sure that your brain is getting the nutrients it needs and the appropriate ones. There is, if you ever get into, I'm trying to figure out how much to go into nutrition, but there is actually a nerve that it's called the vagus nerve that runs through your brain down through your spinal cord and links with a couple with your heart and your lungs and your gut. And one of the things that helped me to stay away from sugar and some of the simple carbs is I was listening to a doctor talk about the vagus nerve, and when we eat sugar, it inflames your gut, which is attached to the vagus nerve, which then sends signals up to your brain that releases chemicals that affect your mental health. So increased depression, increased anxiety. That's not something, of course, that you're going to see if you just have sugar every now and then. It's more for those people that used to be me that consumed a lot of sugar all the time. I love sugar, especially baked goods. So that was something when I read about that kind of helped me to go, oh, okay, it's not good for me. Because for me, it was like, yeah, I know sugar's bad, but when someone would say why, then it was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So, so nutrition is going to be really big right now. If you can make your body feel best by getting the appropriate nutrients, that's going to be a good way to start things off. Sleep's really important. So if you can get good sleep, please do. Just do the best that you can. The technique I'm going to show you at the end can be really helpful before you go to sleep to calm your nervous system down. So that can be a way to help with your sleep, as well as if you wake up in the middle of the night and you notice that your mind's racing. It's just a simple thing you can do to calm it down. Exercise. I know for me, exercise has been very, very key over this past few weeks. And I used to exercise like once or twice a week, so it's not like it's something that I was doing often, but I am getting some type of exercise every single day because that is the one thing that is really helping my brain to stay in a good place. And even if it's just something as simple, it's not that yoga is simple, but yoga has been a huge one. I think it was last Saturday where I really I felt like my brain felt foggy. And it was almost like that feeling of depression, like just that foggy feeling of like I took a nap that was way too long and woke up just kind of like this. And I went and found a yoga video on YouTube and did that, and I felt so much better afterwards. So it doesn't have to be big things. It's just something to get your heart rate up for at least 20 minutes, but doesn't have to be strenuous exercise with that. So do your best to get some kind of exercise every single day, especially if you have children. Children really, really, really need to get physical release. So do what you can to get the kiddos active. It'll help a lot with their behavior too. Minimize news and social media exposure. It's good to have information. It's good to know what's going on. It's good to know what's going on in the world. But when you notice yourself obsessing with it or consumed with checking things or knowing things, or you notice your body getting really panicky every time you look at it, just get the minimum of what you need and then make an effort to not watch it anymore. Especially social media, because people get really nasty, and it's not helpful to be stuck in that place. It's not helpful to have people that are judgy or telling you what to do or criticizing or, overplaying or underplaying or whatever it is. It's not necessarily a helpful thing for a lot of people. So just be aware of when it becomes too much for you and just make an effort to not engage in it. So that is one thing that I would definitely say will be helpful for a lot of people, is just being aware of when you need to put those things away. And then, like we're going to talk about, is soothe your nervous system and take care of your body. That's going to be a great coping skill. So let's talk a little bit more about concrete, or a few more concrete coping skills. So the 5 senses can be really helpful. You can't be in your head with anxiety racing thoughts and focus on 5 senses at the same time. Not sure why, but you just can't. So that's going to be focusing on things like touch. So if you notice right now, if you rub your hands on something, it's like, what does it feel like? Is it smooth? Is it bumpy? Is it hard? Is it soft? What's the temperature with it? What does it feel like if you move it back and forth between your hands? Or for some people, using bare feet and doing this is more, it's easier to focus on because your feet aren't necessarily used to touching things as much as your hands are. So, sometimes if you just rub your feet across the carpet, you may notice sensory things a little bit more, as well as like smell. What do you smell? If you notice around, like, or if you have like essential oils that you can just sit and smell, what does it smell like? What do you notice? If you can find a smell in particular that's calming to you, that's going to be the best way to go. And then there's taste. So if you are mindful, as they call it, like mindful eating, is when you're eating something, you notice, like, what's the temperature? What does it feel like if I just let it sit in my mouth? What does it feel like if I chew? What does it feel like when I swallow? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it salty? Is it sweet? Or, whatever, the more you can focus on that for the longest period of time is going to be the best. And then obviously sight. So what do you see? And you want to be really concrete with this one. So say, for example, I see just breathe on that slide, and it's a bunch of clouds, and there's, it spells just breathe in white, and there's a blue background, and it's a square on a white PowerPoint sheet. So it's going to be really, really concrete. You want to avoid analyzing, because when you start to analyze, then you're getting into your thinking brain and it doesn't work the same. So you just go over your 5 senses, and making things really concrete. It actually works best if you can do it out loud too, but sometimes you don't want to look like you're crazy and you're talking to yourself. So if you just do it in your head, it's very helpful. And usually you'll find a couple senses that work best for you, then you can just go straight to those. Meditation can be really helpful. I don't like just quiet meditation. That doesn't work for me. My head or my thoughts start to race when I do that. So guided meditations are really helpful. There's a lot of them on YouTube, or you can find them in music services, Spotify and iTunes and things like that have it. So, but YouTube's free, so I really like that. Meditation, or and one thing I didn't throw in there is like whatever spiritual connection that you may have. For some people it's prayer. For some people it may just be like sit outside for a minute and connect with nature. Whatever it is for you, that's a really powerful one too. Distraction. If you find yourself racing in your thoughts and having a hard time, find a way to distract. So for me, it's reading fiction books. I want to get lost in some fake story that helps me get out of my head. Or for some people, it's, it may be go and play dolls with your child, or Legos, or whatever, whatever video game or whatever it is, just distract your thinking. Get out in the sun if you can't. We haven't had a lot of sun lately, besides for yesterday. I got stuck inside. That wasn't good. But go out in the sun. Vitamin D, really important. Just have some sun if you can. And be patient with yourself and others. One of the things that I've had a large increase in crisis sessions with moms that feel like they're losing their minds, and talking through that. And one of the things that I try to stress that I continually hear is there's this bar of what being a parent should look like, an effective parent should look like. And we have to be patient with ourselves right now, because at some point we're just trying to survive. So for some people, it's, are your kids alive today? Did you feed them? Great. That's awesome. Just for today, that's awesome. Like, just focus on getting through the day. And it's not going to be the day where you take your kids out to do things and you're perfectly engaged with them and you're meeting all their needs and you've got this 5-course meal. Like, it's okay to lower your bar right now to just get through this period of time and give yourself some grace. I mean, it's really hard. Or, and that's even as, like, think like a partner. It doesn't have to be where it used to be, because right now we're just getting through those times and doing the things that we can. And so just have some patience with yourself. That's one thing that I really want to encourage people to do, is just do the best that you can with what you have, and don't expect yourself to be perfect. So my thought on that. Focus on what you can control. There's a lot of things you can't control right now. So if you're focusing on everything you can't control, then you're going to lose your mind. So maybe try to shift your focus on what you can control. Make a list of what you can control. It's helpful to write things down. If you make a list of what I can control and what I can't control, and just focus on what you can control. And so, you know, I guess it's cup half full thinking in some way, but having that, they call it like the locus of control, and being able to focus on what you do have control of your life. And sometimes it's just something as simple as, I took a shower today. Awesome. You controlled that. That's great. That's always a good thing. So it may be simple, but whatever it is, just go with it. Allow yourself a brief period to freak out if you need to. If you really need to go find somewhere where you can just fall apart, do it. Set a 10-minute timer or 15-minute or however long you feel like you need, and just go fall apart, because that's okay. It really is. You just let it out of your system. And that actually sometimes is a great way to reset the nervous system, is to get out the emotion that's being stored in your body. So it's okay to do that. We just hope that we don't do it on other people. So it's okay if you need to be strategic of saying, I'm going to go into my room and freak out for a little while. And that's okay. Do it. If it helps, then do it. And then I guess minimizing time obtaining information, and that's a little repetitive. We already talked about that. And maintain a schedule as much as you can. You do have to kind of flow with things right now, but if you can feel, that's one of those things of like, I have some control in my life, is if you can maintain a schedule and try to get things going, it does give that sense of control and just a calming feeling. And it's very good for kids to know predictability. So do that as much as you can, but if it, don't do it to the point where it creates an additional stress. So let's talk about calming the nervous system. So this is the part that's going to be, it's going to help you to get to the point where you can do those long-term coping skills and to get out of the sympathetic nervous system. Or, you know, calming the nervous system, or just helping yourself to not get overloaded in the first place. So one of the things with the talk that I was watching, it was a TED Talk, as the gentleman was talking about, and we did, I think I spoke on this briefly already, is talking to people out, well, I say every day, but that depends on the spectrum of what your needs are. Talk to people, and you, in order to soothe your nervous system and to meet the needs of what you have to hear their voice or see their face. So like we were talking about, texting and emailing and social media is not going to work. You've got to be able to hear a voice or see a face, because that's what we are wired for. We're not wired for any other way to do it. So you'll notice for those people that need more connection, if you're just text messaging, you're not going to feel better. But if you pick up the phone, or you know, I've seen people with pictures where they go park in a parking lot and they're all distances apart, but sitting on top of their cars talking to each other in a safe distance. So some people are doing that. You know, some people are doing FaceTime or Zoom meetings like this and just connecting with people. So make an effort to do that if that's something that you need. So yeah, it says no text, social media, or email. And I definitely stay away from like text message fighting with people. It's not a good idea. Not going to work very well, because you can't see their body language. So what we're going to talk about now. So we're going to talk about a technique that's called vergence. And this is a technique that's from a therapy approach called brain spotting. And I'm going to keep this very simple because it can get very technical. And what brain spotting is it's actually a therapy technique that utilizes something that we naturally do. We all naturally brain spot all the time. So if you watch someone, especially if they're talking about something that is emotionally upsetting or something that is a heightened topic, they will look into certain places. So you may notice I'm looking over here when I'm talking about something, or, you know, I'm looking down and over here, or, you know, for some people it's, you know, I'm looking down like this, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're avoiding eye contact. For some people it's their brain spot. So they're looking down. And what the brain spot does is it actually activates the part of your brain where you're storing the emotion. When you go to school, for therapy, for master's degree or PhD, they talk a lot about the fact that talk therapy in terms of solving trauma or things that we're storing in our body does not historically work very well. It's the relationship with the therapist that is the most effective. Talk therapy is great for learning skills and for talking through, basic things like how do you, long-term coping skills or like dialectic behavioral therapy skills. It's good for that. But in terms of processing trauma or deep-rooted emotions, you're not using the right part of the brain. So when you're talking, you're using this part of your brain, and that's not where that information is stored. It's stored in your midbrain, which is, I should have put a picture on here. But that is where all the sensory information goes in and gets processed. So brain spotting, when you're doing it, is you're activating the right part of the brain to be able to process that information appropriately, not appropriately, but effectively. So what Vergence therapy does is it's going to activate the parasympathetic nervous system so your body can calm down. So it kicks it into hyper mode and it calms down the sympathetic nervous system. It works well with music. So calming music, I should clarify that. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So what you are going to need to do this is a pointer of some sort. So whether I usually, as a therapist, I do it. I have my own little pointer that goes with it, but I had a pen. I don't know what happened to my pen. Okay, here's a new pen. You can use a pen. You can even just use your finger. I will do that at times when I don't have something available, and I will just use, I'll just use my finger because you just need something to look at. And it doesn't even have to be something that's pointy. I mean, I could take my cup and stick it in front of my face and use it. I mean, you guys can't see that, but where is it? Okay, right there. I'm on the wrong camera here. So it's just something that you can look at is what you will need. Music with headphones can be really helpful too for those people that like a little bit more of the calming music. If you get on either Spotify or I'm sure iTunes or any music service, if you look up bilateral, which you can see that word right there, bilateral music, it will pull up a bunch of different music tracks that have been created to do bilateral stimulation. And what that means is you will notice with your earphones on that it goes back and forth between one ear and the other. It's not both sides. So you have to have earphones on for this music to work effectively, because if you've just got it like on your phone or on speakers or something, it's not going to get the back and forth. So if you need the extra sensory input, which for me, I usually do, the music can be really helpful. But for what we're doing right now, you don't need to worry about that. So, okay, so I'm going to walk you guys through this real quick, and then I'm going to talk you through it and we're going to practice. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your pointer and you're going to hold it about 6 inches from your face. And I'm going to show you kind of to the side here so you guys can see. I don't know if that's 6 inches, I'm just guessing, but so it doesn't have to be exact, but you're going to hold it at your face. And what you're doing is you are actually, so you've got it from your face, part 2, you're going to direct your gaze right at the point or whatever it is that you're holding up. So it could be my finger, I'm looking at the point of it. So that's what you're going to do first. And I don't know if you guys can see my eyes, but I'm looking right at it. So that's going to be the second part to it. So third part is you're going to take, I'm looking at it, and what you're going to do is you're going to direct your gaze straight through to something a few feet away. So I'm really close to the wall, so I can't get a huge distance away. But for me, I've got a Red Sox sign for my husband's computer right in front of me. So it doesn't have to be a huge distance, but you want to be able to look through it. So you're looking at it, and then you're looking through it at a distance farther away, a few feet away, or can be a bit away. So what we're going to do is you're going to move your sight back and forth between these two spots. So it's going to be about a 3 or 4 second count between the two of them. So kind of hoping, I'm trying to move here so you guys can see my eyes of what I'm doing. So if you notice, is I'm looking right here, I'm looking at the spot, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm looking through the spot, 1, 2, 3, 4, at the spot, 2, 3, 4, through the spot, 2, 3, 4. So that's all you're going to do. That's simple. You don't have to think about anything. Actually, you want to not think about anything. you just let yourself move back and forth between this spot. And again, you're going to hold it 3 or 4 seconds. You could do 5. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to be not too quick, but quick enough that you're going back and forth between the spot. You're going to do this for as long as it takes to notice your body to calm down. Sometimes it's usually about 3 to 5 minutes. I've had times where I've had to do it for 10 minutes to get my body to fully calm down. And I've had times where I've done it for 10 seconds and it worked that quickly. So it really just depends on what your needs are at that time. The higher activation, oftentimes the longer that you're going to need with it, especially when you're new to this approach. The more that you start to train your brain to do it and train yourself to do it, the quicker you're going to calm down most of the time. One thing that I like to encourage too, so using a scale of 0 to 10. So if you check in with yourself throughout the day of just noticing like how activated am I today? Like how agitated, how much in my sympathetic nervous system am I today? So, 0 is not at all. Like I'm calm, everything's great. 5 is going to be like, yeah, I'm there, but it's, it's manageable, no big deal. 10 is going to be like, I'm about to lose it, like just total meltdown. It's about a 10. So if you rate yourself on where you are at that time, everybody's different. Some people can be in an 8 and still be managing things. Some people will start to lose their crap at like a 4. So it really just depends. And then I want to encourage you guys to start to notice, like for you, what is the number that you need to start doing this? So maybe it's like, okay, I'm at a 5. I'm going to practice some vergence real quick. Or I'm at a 7 and I'm going to practice it. I'm going to do it real quick. So start to notice and paying attention to where your spectrum is on these things. So let's try it together real quick. I just actually looked at the time. I'm sorry, we are way over. So I apologize for that. I talked a lot. So let's try it for just a minute real quick because I want you guys to be able to practice it and then ask questions if you need to. So I'm going to talk you through it for just a minute again. So again, put up your little pointer, whether it's your finger. I'll just do it with my finger this time to show you how I do it that way. And so you're going to look at it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, through it. 1, 2, 3, 4. At the pointer. 1, 2, 3, 4. Through it. 1, 2, 3, 4. At the pointer. 2, 3, 4. Through it. 2, 3, 4. At the pointer. 2, 3, 4. Through it. 2, 3, 4. At the pointer. 2, 3, 4. And through it. 2, 3, 4. So you see, I'm sure, hopefully you've picked up on the cadence back and forth between the two. So you just keep that going until you start to notice, you'll notice your heart rate slowing down. You'll notice your muscles start to relax. You'll notice your breathing slow down. When you're in the really heightened sense, you may notice yourself start to release some emotions. So some people will cry. Some people will feel like they have a little bit of a meltdown. And the reason for that is our body stores our emotion. So when you're stimulating the right part of the brain where you're being able to calm yourself down, you're going to start releasing emotion that is being stored in your body. And that's a good thing. So just work through it and allow yourself to have that emotion, allow yourself to feel that feeling. Because the more you go through the vergence back and forth, it's going to calm down and it's going to pass. So that's the important thing to remember. If you're doing it and you notice some increased anxiety for a minute, just let yourself feel that. Just let it be, because really it's just your body working through that process and it'll pass, it'll go away. So you just keep going with it until you start to notice that release within your body. And again, for a lot of people, if music is your thing, music will actually increase it'll happen quicker if you incorporate the music, or it'll go deeper if you incorporate the music. Some people can't stand it, don't feel like you need to. You don't have to have it. So that's it. That's what I have. I did not put together a resources thing because I figured if you would like that, I'd be happy to give it to you. If you want to know the research studies that I looked into or the TED Talks, I'm happy to send it to you. Or any questions you may have. I put my email address on there. You can email Heather if you want to, or I put mine too. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me in anything that you may need.